It's high noon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 17 of Fantasy Overwatch League Play, or FOWL Play, as we typically go by. I am your host, DeathBlow, joined, as always, by Asmith. How you doing today, my friend?
Man, I am so good, and so sunburned, I can't even help it.
And I guess Blevins is here. I mean, it's rare. I almost forgot. But might as well.
I just showed up at my computer and there was a phone call with you two guys, and I just wanted to chat. I didn't know I was going to be on the show.
Yeah, completely unplanned. He's basically given up on the show. He's content to just beat us and then not talk about it on a weekly basis. He's
I'm not giving up. I'm just it's like a little treat every time I'm on now. I'm like a special guest character. I'm like the Green Ranger in Power Rangers. Only 90s kids will remember.
A treat for who, Blevins? That's my only question for you, is a treat for who.
For whom?
Let's say exactly my point. Exactly my point. That summed it up better than I could have possibly hoped to personally. But let's move on. Enough making fun of Blevins for missing a couple shows. Let's go in and talk about how we did this past week. As you guys know, our expert leagues are cutting to the playoffs after the next week. So this was the second last week we just played before we cut to the playoffs. Asmith is clinging on for dear life in the old scoring format. I am clinging on for dear life in the new scoring format. Blevins, we don't talk about him because he's not usually here. But Asmith, how'd you do this week?
Man, I did well. I'm going to be honest, really bad. But this new meta was wacky, man. All these new players coming in. Who knew Seda was going to take the position as the Reinhardt? Did not see that coming. I mean, there's so many different things that happened this week that me starting players was, well, sketchy at best. But I've got a good easy win against Kyle next week to lock up my playoff spot. So thanks, Kyle, for being so easy on me and sucking.
Yeah, we don't know a lot about the Blackwatch Report guys. That's just kidding. We talk to them all the time. But one thing we do definitely know is that they're really bad at fantasy Overwatch. Blevins, how'd you do this past week, my friend?
Oh, easy 2-0.
All right, anyways, so my week, I went
all
1-1.
I'm saying is I have Jonak in my old scoring system, so I really don't ever need to change anything with that. I'm pretty sure I've been playing players that don't even exist anymore. No, actually, it's not too bad. But I have Jonak and Fate and Pluppy. The rest of my team is irrelevant.
Well, I went 1-1 on the week. As far as I can tell, when I was setting my lineup last week, I didn't hit submit, and I just kind of left it as it was the previous week after deciding who to put in. But thankfully, that's the league I won in, so I'm still alive in the playoffs there, and still alive in the playoffs as well, though I did fall to Abnerd in the new scoring format. Really, really close. We both had really high scores compared to the rest of the league, I should say. So I'm not too upset about it. He clearly excelled a little bit in the new meta. All I got to do is win next week, and I will be locked and loaded for those playoffs. And even if I lose, I still got a good chance. So I'm feeling hopeful there. Don't think I deserve to make the playoffs in the one league, but we'll see if I get there.
Which league are you playing me?
I don't know. I look backwards. I don't look forwards. New format? Okay.
Wait. New format. You got a chance there. My old scoring format team is insane.
Gotcha. Well, anyways, we will see. There are a couple host battles next week, so Blevins won't be here to talk about them, I'm sure. But either way, we will fill you in and let you know who goes into the playoffs for each of those leagues. Also, I'll probably make the playoff bracket into like a spreadsheet and maybe make it public facing for you guys. It'll be in the show notes. Keep an eye out for it next week. But we do have a little bit of news here and listen, we did preface the conversation in last week's episode that we're going to talk about the Hanzo meta because it would have been pretty easy to figure out things we thought in the slightly newer patch. And honestly, I think we were kind of successful there. Like, I don't think there was near as many shakeups and craziness. We spent a lot of time talking about who the Hanzo player would be, who the Brigitte player would be. Our apologies for that. We just didn't have the information. We were doing our best with what we had. But now we know that the new Hanzo is not in the patch. My phone is not on silent because I am a terrible podcaster. So
party foul.
I don't even know who's calling me right now.
Yeah,
so.
client. It's me.
Classic Blevins.
Phone check.
But yeah, so my apologies for that. But yeah, so we now know that the Brigitte player will not be any one player for just about every single team. They're going to do a good amount of rotating with who plays that. And also, your usual tanks are in. There is still a heavy Zarya presence. We'll talk about that a little bit as we move along here. But the other bit of news is we got to see Sato for the first time. I know I have an opinion here, or maybe I've yet to develop an opinion here on this particular roster decision. But I'm curious what you guys thought about Sato's initial performance here and what you think about him going forward in fantasy. Let's start with Asmith.
Look, I'm gonna take the everybody, the crowd reaction here, and Sato's amazing. Next coming of Jesus Christ here. I mean, this guy is the best thing ever. He's gonna change the Philadelphia team. They're gonna win every game possible. That's what's gonna happen because Sato is just that good. He was boosting for a reason. It's Sato. He's the next big thing. But really, I mean, they didn't play anybody. I mean, to be honest, like they just didn't play anybody that great. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. I mean, Fraggy is good, but he looked a little rusty on Reinhardt, to be honest with you, when he played it. So Sato looked good. He looked fresh, and I think he's earned his starting spot. So we'll see what happens. And if, they play somebody not as good next week, which I don't think they are, we'll see what happens.
It gets easier for them next week, actually. But Blevins, what did you think of Sato this week in his initial debut?
He was fine, but he had 140 points, which is, I mean, I think we should probably decide now that when we're talking about tanks here, we're just going to not include Siegel and Taimu at the top. Like, can we agree with that? Okay.
Yes.
They count as tanks, so all of you guys that you guys all hit the jackpot there, but he's still, even if you take those out, he's still not even in the top 10, which, I mean, for what it's worth, his first week, but 140 points, like small sample size, not even like if he spiked, I mean, I'd probably call it a douse the flames, but it's too early to tell anything. And Death, I know you're going to touch on why you think it's even less reliable than just a small sample size.
Yeah, so if I'm being perfectly honest, watching the game of the Boston Uprising versus the Philadelphia Fusion, I thought there was really just about one player on the stage that was playing really, really well. His name was Carpe, if you didn't notice. He was absolutely ridiculous in that matchup. And then the rest of the team really, I mean, even took Carpe a little bit to get rolling. And I just didn't think I was watching good Overwatch when I saw the Philadelphia Fusion and the Boston Uprising play against each other. Boston continued to struggle, lost 3-1 against both the Philadelphia Fusion and the Houston Outlaws this week. And then the other matchup for the Philadelphia Fusion was the Florida Mayhem. Now, I think we can all kind of agree there that that's a matchup they should win, regardless of who the tank player is. So I do get the feeling that this is going to be Sato's job. I'm just not really yet decided on whether or not I think it's correct on the Reinhardt maps to be playing him. I did really like his Winston play. There was a couple, like 200 IQ Winston maneuvers that he pulled off there. On Dorado, very specifically, he like baited the enemy team into the museum room. That's what I call it in callouts. I don't know what you guys call it. You might not have any idea what I'm talking about, but there's a Twitch clip of it, and I believe it's included in our top 10 plays of the week. You can check our YouTube for that. It was a really, really nice play. He basically baited 3 players chasing him into a room, and then a rip tire came flying in out of the courtyard, took out both of the support players for the enemy team. I believe that was the Florida Mayhem matchup, but I could be wrong on that. No, I believe it was Boston, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. So, really, really smart Winston player. It was really nice to see a little bit of change of pace over the just hyper-aggressive fraggy style that we've been seeing lately. But as far as the Reinhardt play goes, I'm not sold yet that that's the correct move. But I am very partial to fraggy, and I don't really know Sato. So I really just kind of want to see him prove it. But
one thing to note is that from a fantasy perspective, it's probably risky to have either because from Philly's perspective, well, automatically splitting play time, I think that's just always going to hurt both of them. But from Philly's perspective, like every other team in the league has had 30 weeks of figuring out Fraggy and his play styles. And now they can even if Sato is better than Fraggy, they can mix it up just to keep them on their toes, right? It's well, we've played we're so used to okay, well, they're going to do this on Dorado because we played it 100 times. Well, Sato does something completely different. So it's almost like playing a brand new team. So they get they get that complete advantage with a very skilled and potentially even more skilled player. So I think, Sato, we're going to be seeing him, but from a fantasy perspective, might not be the safest pickup here.
Yeah, now for what it's worth, when we look at Sato's maps, he only missed the first map. Fraggy played one map, he officially started versus Boston, then he was out and back in. So I'm not so sure they're splitting time, but like I said, and looking at their schedule next week, just to kind of spoil what's coming up in the notes when we do talk about the matchups, they play against Shanghai and Dallas this week. So we won't even know. They could roll out a tank and I could just be like, is this the B team? I don't know. I have no idea. They could just be playing the backup and we won't know in either of those matchups. So it's going to be interesting to keep our eyes on. I'm leaning for this week though with the Blevins here. I would want to pick up Sato if I could, and maybe at the end of the stage here he becomes a locked and loaded valuable asset for you. But I don't think I would start him this week. Yeah, I don't think I would start him this week though, and it might honestly just be too late for me to really trust Sato in any capacity going forward.
He could be a high. He could be. I guess he's kind of like a high, almost like a sleeper in a way. Where he's a high risk, you might get burned by him, but he also could get you some points. But
yeah, I might need to look at some of my teams that are the one that's on the outside looking in at the playoffs. Because if I Hail Mary have to win this week and I don't like my tank lineup,
well, I can tell you that Sato is not available in at least one of the leagues. 'Cause I got him.
That is
2 weeks ago.
certainly fair. But we'll talk a little bit more about Sato when we talk about the matchups here a little bit going forward. And also, there's a couple other items on the news list here. Very, very simple. Boston good, Boston bad, Houston good. So yeah, when watching this week, there was a couple, not too many surprise bad teams, but a couple surprise very, very good teams that look like they're going to kind of be the trendsetters here, maybe the ones that help actually define the metagame and figure everything out. Houston was definitely one of them, and Boston was definitely not. So I'm very specifically keeping my eye on the Gladiators and the Houston Outlaws. They seem to be the ones with a plan for this stage. Whether I agree with that plan or not, I'm much more comfortable with a team that had one and executed it with success. So I think they're going to be doing, both of those teams will be doing a very good job, and they just happen to be my favorite team. So I'm really happy with the state of Overwatch League right now. Last thing on the list, that we got to see our boy Numlocked. I believe you stole my scrim block.
That I was promised I would get one map. Well, you got it, buddy.
You got your map, Numlocked. You're officially in the Overwatch League. Also, I did kill you on Mercy that one time, but
also we have the same amount of fantasy points in Overwatch League.
Yes, still got 0 fantasy points. I wouldn't be rushing to my waiver wire to pick up Mr. Numlocked, but I will say the 3G Express, Mr. Seb Barton, I do really like him as a player. He's a very good Reinhardt player in the past, at least. It's been a while since we've seen him. I can't vouch for his skills still being sharp after all that bench time. And I'm certainly not going to judge him on this one map appearance that he made with KSF and a bunch of other guys that have barely seen the stage. Not really a situation to succeed, despite being against the Shanghai Dragons.
I'm just glad we finally got to see Garbage Time rear its head in Overwatch League. I've been waiting for this for a while.
Yeah, and I'm glad a team that I might care about their map differential in a tie with Houston was the one that decided to do it. So moving on, though.
Here's the problem. They're still number one in their division.
Yes, that is definitely a fact, and I think they're just kind of leaning on that, right? And it's not necessarily a bad strategy for them. It's going to be really weird. We could be in a scenario where the top 6 teams are all in the other division. I think it's possible. No, it's not, because the Gladiators are the one that I would think. So they're got to worry about the Gladiators more than Seoul, in my opinion. But
I mean, they won the actual face-off against Seoul. So even in a tie, there's no super draw.
Right.
They got
right. Yeah, and
did they win it every week though?
I think it's 2-2 total.
So it's split.
I don't think they've played the 4th time yet, so I think it's 2-1 in favor of the Valiant. Did they play this week?
Yeah, they played. They won 3-2 versus Seoul this week.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about, in my head, I'm still on the LA versus LA matchup.
No, LA versus Seoul, I meant.
Yeah, and mentally,
LA
Seoul is
versus
just
LA.
out of the running for me. They seem lost and falling fast. With just
man.
With just no room. I mean, the 2 teams I mentioned that seem like trendsetters in this meta are behind Seoul by 1 game, and Seoul is just trending downward in a quick fashion. With those teams rising, it seems likely that Seoul is going to fall out of the end of season playoff conversation. Who would have thought going into the season Dallas and Seoul would be out of the playoffs? We're not there yet, but it does look like we're headed that way. Moving on, though, let's talk about the leaders and feeders from the first week of Stage 4. Crazy week. Asmith, we're going to start with you, because in the tank category, we've got something that bugs me a little bit here. So why don't you talk to us about who the top leaders are for the tank position?
I would say this one bugs me, but I can't really be mad about it, because Fuel players up in here. Like, hey, look, Fuel's dominating the meta here. We've got 3 Fuel players in the leaders in tanks, but 2 of them are DPS, and that would be Seagull and Taimu. They put up 278 and 274 and 268 points respectively. Number 1 and number 2 overall tank. Look, they're busted right now. They broke Winston's lab, apparently, because Winston's lab is just not fixing it. We knew this was a problem a couple of weeks ago, and Arrow is obviously has them on his fantasy team, and he's like, look, I gotta capitalize on this. And so he's like, we're playing them. That's what's happening. And look, Seagull and Taimu are great for fantasy purposes. I will say that. No, I mean, they're not that bad player.
All right. Well, Asmith, you recovered from your laggy weirdness just in time for me not to interrupt you. Moving on, though, I'm going to take this next one here because I've got a little clip to play for you guys.
Oh my goodness, it is carnage. The hammer soaked in the blood of his enemies.
Of course, that means Super was our next tank leader from last week. 191 points for the San Francisco Shock main tank. The number 5 overall tank on the week. A really strong performance here. A player I talked about. We all talked about. He's known for his Reinhardt play, and now he's a little more comfortable in this meta, so it's very good to see him bump up in the scoring here. A little bit more dive than we were planning on when the Hanzo patch was live. So, when we were talking about him as a potential turnaround, we were thinking more every map would be a Reinhardt map sort of situation, but not quite what we got. His Winston play is improving. I'm not 100% sold here, but I do think he's a viable starting option and certainly had a very good week this week if you did have to use him. Blevins, why don't you take our last tank leader?
Yeah, I don't know. Asmith, are you sure you don't want to do it? You want to go for another round here?
I'll do it.
But no, honestly, this one's OGE from Dallas Fuel. Had 190 points. It's the number 6 overall tank. I mean, this is his second best performance since he's started playing. His first week out, he actually had 233 points. He's kind of fallen off from there. I mean, I'm assuming this is mostly from playtime, but 190 points. I mean, I'm still not buying into too many Dallas players, even with Arrow. Like, until we get to know exactly what Arrow's strategy is and what Dallas's plan is for the team. I mean, I'm really hesitant because they might be retrying out for their positions with the new coach. We might see a lineup this week and then see something completely different next week potentially. So I'm not necessarily bought into this, but 190 points is definitely a nice pickup if you need some players to invest in for later.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see a Coco week come out of the Dallas Fuel. They're not in a situation like Shanghai where they really have to get a win this stage or something like that. They can really just basically I don't want to say take it easy, but they can pretty much just take it easy and like just kind of worry about personal performances, stuff like that. Moving on though, let's have a little bit of a conversation about support players here. Blevins, we're going to let you talk about your boy because there's a first ever time that something has happened here in fantasy Overwatch. Take it away.
We are going to knight the. I can't even just call him a person. He's just a Overwatch god amongst Overwatch men, and that is of course Jonak, the first ever player to break 400 points. First time ever. 405 points. First overall player. First everything, man. I mean, no surprises other than that. It's just surprising that he could possibly score that many points. Not surprising that he did it. I mean, come on, man. Nerf Jonak, seriously.
Yeah, definitely nerf Jonak, though I will say you can't even nerf Zenyatta, because I think if you were to take Zenyatta out of the metagame, I just think that would unlock New York in a way that we've never seen before, because Zen would still be perfectly viable for them because Jonak's not a human being and he could play it at that level regardless of how good it was. Just an absolutely absurd week from him. For what it's worth, Sebayobi also crossed 400 points in the old scoring format. So if you are playing in that format as well, 2 New York Excelsior players crossed that ridiculous barrier. Asmith, you've had something to say for a couple minutes, so take it away.
I do. You were saying Jonak would, like, if you nerf... Okay, Jonak was known as an Ana player before he came here. Just let that sink in. Jonak was known as an Ana player before he even became the Zenyatta god that he is.
So is Jaehong. How'd that work out for him? Moving on,
I'm just saying.
One's the real deal. One's
like I'm just saying, like, if you like nerf Zenyatta out of the ground, Jonak's still gonna get his, man. Jonak's just too good.
Yeah, he's ridiculous.
I don't.
And will clearly be the #1 overall player going into next season. I'm already fairly certain of that. But Blevins, why don't you take our #2 support player here?
Well, I mean, I took the #1 support player, so do we
go Asmith. Asmith just finished talking, so in my head, he did the whole Jonak segment.
Oh, there you go. All right, #2, the second guy we got here is Kareev. He put up 208 points, 3rd overall support. Look, Kareev was one of the people that didn't get subbed out when the Valiant played their garbage minutes because I think Izayaki is not here yet. So, but he's still, Kareev has just been consistently good. He hasn't been quite at the very, very top of the ladder the whole time. But look, Kareev is good. He's a startable option every week. He popped off this week, did really, really well. I think he was one of the best Valiant players this week, and I looked for Kareev to continue to show up.
Yeah, he's really the LA Valiant of fantasy players in that he's just always a very average performer, just kind of does the the minimum sometimes what you expect keeps you competitive at all times, but at the end of the day, not a world beater by any stretch. And the last support leader here for the week was Zupe, the #6 support on the list for the week with 181 points. Florida Mayhem continue to struggle, but from a fantasy output perspective, the support players do a pretty bang-up job here. So good to see Zupe have a pretty good week for any fantasy owners that decided to use him. Moving on, let's talk about some DPS players. Blevins, just talk.
Yeah, we had my boy SBB with 375. God, was that? I'm trying to do a really quick check. Is that like the most that had ever been done before?
That's the season high for a DPS player. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I was gonna say it would have been the all-time like leading scorer. Or highest score, except Jonak also had 400 plus this week. So it was absolutely insane. I mean, you can kind of see like my whole just buying into NY early on in fantasy and just being like, you know what, I'm just going to pick the New York players and they're going to be good and that'll probably end up working out. It's kind of worked out. I had SBB. I've had either SBB or Jonak on basically every single team I've ever built.
Well, there was a time SBB used to be a feeder, so your team's pretty solid outside of that, regardless.
Because I also fill in the blanks with Fluppy.
They only played 8 maps. How crazy is that?
Yeah, definitely crazy. One thing I will say, SBB did step up and play a little bit of the Brigitte role, only in the second match. But I gotta say, so far, I really think the Brigitte players do really well in the point scoring category. Just their ability to the combo from Brigitte that just wipes out players off the face of the map, just gets you in the kill feed more often than I think we expected a support player to be.
Long.
Yeah, the deaths are super low. Everything about the hero seems to lend itself to fantasy purposes. So thanks for that, Blizzard. Now, I'm going to take the stage here, and we're all just going to have to listen to this real fast, and you should probably get used to it.
The outlaws are coming.
All right, A. Smith took his headset off, even though he doesn't have to hear it himself. That's my boy Jake. He in with 222 points on the week, the number 4 overall DPS player, one behind Linkser. Just a phenomenal week in general for both of the Outlaws DPS players. Jake showed a flexibility that I don't know that any other meta's really given him the ability to demonstrate before. If you were questioning his Pharah play, you're now questioning the fact that you were questioning it. He looked phenomenal on Pharah throughout this weekend. He had a really, really good Brigitte run. His tactical crouch game is still very much so on point. Easily the best tactical croucher in the Overwatch League. I'm very comfortable making that claim for Jake here. And of course, his Junkrat is ridiculous on Horizon Lunar Colony Point 2. It's just a very good stage here for the Outlaws. Basically everything we talked about, the lack of Tracer, the map pool, all that stuff, reared its head in week 1. And I think it changed a lot of people's minds if they were on the fence about the Outlaws. But Blevins, why don't you take it away, talk about the last DPS leader of the week.
I'm going to, again, pass this one over to A. Smith because I did the first one.
Well,
I'm not
you know
even
what?
here anymore.
A.
Whatever.
Smith, you're out this week. Just Blevins.
Pack it up and go home. All right, sure. I'm going to talk about Sure4 because look, this guy needs to be talked about. 209 points, fifth DPS overall this week. Look, he's been showing up. I really think Sure4 has become the constant. Asher literally played one map this week. Because Tracer's dead basically, and Sure4 has become the constant DPS that you can use him. So if you invested in him and you kept with him during this weird try-hard thing that was going on with the three people playing the same, you never had no idea what was happening. Sure4 is finally getting all his maps. Sure4 is going to be continually playing every time, and I think Gladiators are better for it.
Off topic, we saw a lot of Silk Thread this week. Anybody buying into Silk Thread?
I would for this meta.
Yeah, pick him up.
I think he's
definitely a pickup, not a start.
Yeah, I didn't like him in the past. They didn't seem like they had a plan with him. I just thought they were throwing him into places Hydration was a better fit for, and kind of how they were using him in the past. So they kind of took a break with Silk Thread, found a way to acclimate him. Really, I think doing a great job of allowing him to flex and play all the heroes in his hero pool, at least over the limited time we got to see this week. I think it really plugged a lot of holes for the Gladiators. I'm very optimistic about his involvement going forward, and I would definitely be picking him up as well. Now we're going to go into the feeders conversation here. We're going to start on tanks, and A. Smith, you better go first before I skip you again. So who's our number 1 tank feeder of the week?
Look, number 1 tank feeder is somebody who you would be shocked to because this guy has literally always been Gesture. He put up 140 points. That's the 13th overall tank. Gesture from the London Spitfire, 13th overall. That's not what you invested in the guy. But the problem was the Spitfire just sucked. They looked bad this week. Like, comparatively, it's almost like firing their head coach was was not a good decision because they really haven't looked that good the last stage. So it didn't hurt Gesture last stage, but this stage it's looking like it might gear up to actually hurt him. And who knows what's going to happen, but for now it's an anomaly. But man, that would be crazy to see Gesture feeding every week.
It would be crazy to see him fall from grace. I'm not overly worried about it myself. I still kind of have the the Spitfire, they looked bad this week, but we talked about how good Houston looked, and then they also played against New York. And for what it's worth, I don't know that I've ever seen anybody dominate and shut down Gesture like we saw Muma do it in their matchup. The man got nothing done. And if the stats were put out in a timely manner, I would love to see the split on his points, because I have a feeling it would be like 120 points versus Janice and Mono and 20 points versus Muma. You know, the team ultimately looked just about as good, overall, but I thought the Outlaws did a better job specifically containing and shutting down Gesture. So props to Muma on that one, who was your number 2 actual tank on the week this week. Though number 3 or 4, ridiculous nonsense. But Blevins, why don't you take the next tank feed?
Yeah, I'm going to take Fate here. He had 116 points, which is the 18th overall tank, which, I mean, if you're, having your second tank here and, you got a late pickup, 116 points is really not that bad, but Fate is always in that top 4, like lowest generally. And he's one of those players that, like, from the preseason was just a top tank. He was the top tank overall for a long time, and then kind of has been battling with Fissure and Gesture as well, and up in that top region. And 116 points, though, it didn't crush my teams. It definitely could have crushed other people's teams. I know for a fact that I picked him up, I believe, within the first 3 rounds of my draft. So I'm just glad that we're only getting that these, low weeks are kind of few and far between for him.
Yeah, and I'm just glad I seem to own Fissure in every team that I have. But moving on, the last tank feeder of the week was Zunba of the Seoul Dynasty. We've already talked about their playoff chances.
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs?
Yeah, don't talk about playoffs. Just trying to win a game. But yeah, Zumba with 94 points. He was the number 20 tank on the week. He played 9 maps, so the man even had an extra map. And for what it's worth, we talked in depth about how good his Zarya was and how excited we were to see that. It's a little hard to play Zarya when you're just constantly shackled to a Winston that doesn't belong in this meta. So he definitely struggled with that. But when we could look at his points and compare what he did with 9 maps, it was 2 points less than Kalios, who had 4 maps on the week. So a brutal performance from Zunba. Our apologies, because I'm pretty sure we would have told you to play him. Moving on, we've got the supports here. So again, I'm going to skip you if you don't go first. So just take it away, Asmith. You're going to lead off the rest of them.
Look, I'm going to take Neko here. 52 points, 26 support. Look, he's been consistently the top support. I think he's number 3 overall as supports. Neko has been very good for fantasy, but this week he got subbed out because he was sick. See the quotes? I'm quoting for you podcasting listeners. He was sick, apparently. Look, he played pretty not good, and so I think they were just trying to figure out something that worked, and they tried to aim God, and it didn't work either. So seems like Boston's got problems, and problems in Boston means Neko's point values are going to go.
Yeah, hard to keep your flex support player alive when you're diving and the rest of the meta is deathballing. Blevins, take us away with the next support feeder of the week.
Yeah, I'm going to jump over to Sleepy here. He had 122 points, which, looking back, is actually the lowest week he's ever had. Since they started, since the new scoring system. His second lowest week ever was 129, and it was, no, that was this week. Yeah, no, this is the lowest week he's ever had. He actually hasn't really been that close. He had 140 a couple of weeks ago, but he's usually over 150 or right at 150 to 200. Has had a couple of 250 weeks. So definitely a low end week for Sleepy. I mean, I don't think I'd put too much stock in him being down and out. I mean, just last week he had almost 200 points. And I don't think you picked up Sleepy at a point in the draft where you're expecting or needing him to have 100 or to have 200 points for your team to survive. And if you are, your team is probably in rough shape anyway. So you can live with these weeks, but it definitely always hurts when your solid $150 a week is shooting lower than that.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a downturn. And I think we talked about him as kind of a disappointment overall last stage. I've lost a lot of confidence in Sleepy, and I might actually be looking to bolster my support line if I was, looking to make not really a playoff run, but still in the running for the championship in my league.
He's still a top 5. He's still the 5th, highest scoring support in the league right now. But yeah, I could definitely see. I mean, for a short format league or playoffs, just a couple of weeks, you can definitely improve potentially.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the one thing he'll always have going for him this season is that he's a Zenyatta player that doesn't switch and doesn't get subbed out. So that will always help him to a certain degree. The last support feeder of the week was, much to A. Smith's chagrin, Mr. Badosin with 105 points, the number 18 support player on the week. He did only play 6 of the 8 maps on the week for the London Spitfire, which does account for some of this, though really not enough of it. It was a rough week for the Spitfire, but again, they did have easily, in my opinion, the most difficult schedule given what we now know. Which is that Houston is up there. At least they were this week. They were among the best teams in the league this week. So moving on, we've got some DPS players. A. Smith, before I skip you, take one away here.
All right, look, there's been a common theme here, and it's been London Spitfire players, and Prophet was no exception to this rule. 125 points, 15 DPS, and overall, look, he's typically in the top 3. He's number 2. He's right now currently the number 2 DPS point scoring. It's an aberration. He did the whole team just did really bad. So when your team feeds like that, he's gonna feed, and it just shows that nobody was untouchable on London this week.
Yeah, pro tip, Prophet. Brigitte counters you when you're on Tracer. You might want to not wait 4 minutes to swap. Blevins, who do you got for a DPS feeder on the week?
Yeah, speaking of abominations and uncharacteristic performances, let's talk about Striker, the number 1 DPS in the league, and he was lower than Prophet. 114 points, number 17 overall. This is one that really... This is a shadow burned if I've ever heard one. This is like under half of what he's usually getting. He had 300 points. Almost 300 points. The last, I don't even know. Since week 11, he's had over 250 points every single week, with the exception of one in week 13 where he had 244. Come on, you're expecting at least 200, if not pushing 3 here from Striker, and with 114 points, man, I'm sure that he lost some people some games this week.
Yeah, and expect it to continue because the team didn't look like they had a plan for the new meta. They looked like they showed up and expected to be able to just continue to dive.
Yeah,
and that's not going to work.
What they've done from the beginning, right? That remember back in stage 1 when we're like, oh, Boston can only dive, but they dive really well. It's like, yeah, but they didn't have to dive against a Brigitte. So,
but Blevins, they went undefeated last. That's my Reddit voice, by the way. If anybody doesn't know, they went undefeated last stage. Yeah, well,
sure did.
It's what was the title of our last episode? A. Smith. It was a whole new world. All right. So
when you fire your head coach, things like that happen. It's crazy. Yeah.
Boston was sure to take a nosedive this stage. We thought they were, I didn't expect them to be this bad. We thought they were relatively safe as far as the overall league standings go, but they are in fact only 4 games off of both Houston and the Gladiators. And again, those teams look to be red hot. And if they're both going to make it, some teams that you expected to be in the playoffs are going to have to drop out, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. The last feeder that we have before we move on to look ahead at the next week is Mr. Munch. Bad old Munch himself comes in with 84 points, just the 21st DPS. He did miss a couple of maps here, I believe. Weekheed was coming in, playing a good amount of Junkrat. The team will not succeed if they cannot play Reinhardt. I'm telling you right now, they will not have good weeks. It will affect everybody across the board. This problem goes beyond play time, missed maps. The guy played 6 maps. Still didn't beat Pine on his 3. He didn't beat Bird Ring, who had an awful week, continues to really, really struggle. The list is long of the play. Logic's outscored him on 5 maps. There's a lot wrong here with the Soul Dynasty, and I am nervous for all of their players, including Bad All Munch, who I have on more than one team. So keep that in mind. You might need to go elsewhere. He looks like he's going to sub out a little bit, and the team looks like they're going to be in shambles this stage, to say the least. Moving on, though, here, Smith, we're going to go through our week ahead, our previews here, the matchups for all the teams in the league, talk about any specific players we think are plus ups, plus downs, and maybe just how we kind of view the matchups for the fantasy players on the other teams overall. And I'm going to start us off, as usual, with the Atlantic Division. We're going to begin with the Boston Uprising. Again, we've talked about all of their struggles, all the issues they're having. However, they do play against Dallas and the Valiant this week, so 2 winnable matchups, and obviously one that, regardless of how much they're struggling, I do expect them to be able to get the win over Dallas here. So I don't think all hope is lost. You're still starting Stryker. You're still starting anybody you normally would. I'd be a little nervous about Neko. Maybe consider looking elsewhere on that one, but you might not have that. He's been so good, you might not be able to find somebody that's kind of an adequate replacement there. 7 maps on the week. They play on Wednesday and Friday for Boston. Be very nervous here, folks. Be very nervous about your Boston players. The Florida Mayhem, or I should say the Florida Saya players, go up against the Los Angeles Valiant and the LA Gladiators this week. So the menace of the hometown crowd, both negative matchups with Florida here. You have to say they're definitely a clear below average team. You've got the Valiant, who are, in my opinion, the definition of the average Overwatch League team, and then the Gladiators, of course, who we think are really set to pop off this stage. So I'm starting Saya player with confidence if I have him. I'm not overly concerned about the lost matchup where Logic's played over him. I think that was just to kind of keep him fresh in case it was needed, stuff like that. They are out of the playoffs, so they can be a little flexible and try stuff out, but Saya's just so good when he's in there. How do you possibly sit the guy? He just makes such an absurd difference for the outcome of this team that I think they've got to play him. So I'd be willing to as well. Moving on, we've got
the Outlaws are coming.
That's right, the Houston Outlaws with matchups against the LA Gladiators and the San Francisco Shock. 6 maps on the week. They play Wednesday and Friday. The match of the week, to me, hands down, is Houston versus the Gladiators. I'm easily the most excited to see that match of all of them. I do think this one is very slightly in favor of the Houston Outlaws, but that's going off a very small sample size and 2 teams that performed very similarly in the sense that they basically dominated both of their opponents. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens when these two. I do think there's a little bit of a different flavor to the plan that each of these teams have. So I'm really excited to see them clash, meet up. It's, in my mind, pretty close to a coin flip. But like I said, I'll give a small advantage to the Outlaws, if for no other reason than I want them to have a small advantage in the matchup. And the other matchup for the Outlaws here is San Francisco. They lost the last 2 against San Francisco. I think that's in their head a little bit, not in a bad way. I think they remember these guys. I don't think there's a chance they sleep on them. Obviously, you don't sleep on a team that you're 1-2 against on the season. So I'm expecting this to be a little closer than I think most people will expect it to be, but we don't mind close matchups for fantasy purposes. If you're talking about the output and performance of the DPS players for Houston, and now you're talking about a 9th or a 10th map being involved, they didn't sub last week. I don't expect them to do that with their DPS guys. I'm all in on all the Houston players that you're normally playing, though that doesn't include Cool Matt because he splits time down the middle with Spree, making basically neither of them playable. The London Spitfire this week play against San Francisco and Seoul. Man, that Seoul matchup could be one of the best, ugliest things we can watch all year. I'm actually really excited about it. There's big playoff implications here. We might be looking at a playoff scenario that doesn't include either of these 2 teams. And both of them clearly want to stay in that conversation and in their position. So what do you guys think? A 5-map set with a 2-1 score? That's what I'm calling on this one. It's going to be such a garbage show. They're going to draw 2 maps and need to go to 5. That's what my thinking is here. It could happen. Keep your eyes open for it. But overall here, I think, if you're ever going to see that bounce back from Prophet, I mean, we basically expect the bounce back from him regardless. But I might even roll the dice a little bit on Birdring in this one, because I do think it's going to be a little bit difficult for even San Francisco and Seoul, obviously, to get into the back line and really disrupt the DPS players here. So I would never bet too much on London players, but, you're in the time of the year where sometimes you're desperate. And if you're desperate and hitting that home run ball, Birdring's a big maybe for me this week. But otherwise, don't trust London. We never do, except for Prophet. You have to trust him at this point. Moving on, we've got the New York Excelsior with matchups against the Shanghai Dynasty. That's who they play this week. Seoul and Shanghai. 7 maps they play on Friday and Saturday. These are 2 easy claps. I would be more worried about them like doing goofy things because they can than I would be about anything else. Don't expect 400 points from 2 different players on the team. It might just be too easy for that. Right. Like Meko's just going to accidentally get too many kills. But yeah, this will be a great week for any New York fantasy players. I hate you, Blevins. Philadelphia.
Notably, we might see more Pine than we normally would. So
you could
looking to something. Probably still not a good start, but maybe.
Yeah, I wouldn't play him, but I also might consider Libero iffy, but he might be getting some flames doused later on in the episode. Spoilers. Philadelphia Fusion are my last team before I hand it over to Asmith, and we've got matchups against the Shanghai Dragons and the Dallas Fuel. They play 7 maps, and they play on Thursday and Saturday. So we've talked already about how we would handle Sato, and that's be a little iffy here, especially with the easy matchups. If they view him as the starter, they might put Fraggy in just because they can. Also, these are going to be quick. These are going to be easy. Carpe is going to just eat everybody alive. EQO is just going to eat everybody alive. I'm not sure there's a lot of other killing blows or final blows to really go around after how good we saw those 2 in particular play, especially at times. They really popped off. The Carpe play on Lijiang Tower might have been one of the most ridiculous things we've seen in Overwatch League so far. Absolutely nutty what that guy can do when he decides he wants to carry. And when he's on, nobody beats Carpe. And I think that very possibly, we haven't seen the matchup a lot, but that might even include Linkser, though Linkser would, on average, I think, win out in that one. But Asmith, talk to us about the Pacific Division.
Look, I'm going to lead it off with Dallas Fuel. I'm going to tell you exactly why you were wrong, DeathBlow. I'm just kidding.
Can't wait to hear
wrong. You're not. Look, this is a time where you're mentally just preparing arrows, trying to just get another win that's not the Shanghai Dragons. And Boston might actually be an opportunity there. I'm going to be honest with you. Boston has looked really, really bad, and they're running dive, and if they run into dive with Mickey on Brigitte, Dallas may be able to capitalize, and I think you're going to get some actual fantasy value from Dallas on the first game. Look, Philly's really good. They looked a lot better this go around, and I just don't think that Dallas has it in them to even contest this. So I think it's going to be an easy clap, and I think you're going to get probably close to what you got out of Dallas this week when they played Shanghai and then the Gladiators. So expect similar numbers, maybe a little lower than what they were, but pretty similar. Next off, you got Gladiator. They are playing the Houston Outlaws and the Florida Mayhem. They've got 5 maps, Wednesday and Thursday. 5 maps is good for them. They don't have to focus as much. If I were them, I'd be focusing all your attention on Houston to see how this new things go right now. This is going to be really, really fun matchup between how the new style clashes work out. And then they should stomp over Florida pretty quickly. So it's going to be some good fantasy value out of the Gladiators. Sure 4 has become a must start. Your tank, your main tank Fisher and Shaz are going to be must starts. Big Goose is still kind of a bubble option if you need him. And then there's a possibility we may see Void. He is now in the country, so Void may play for Bishu. We'll see what happens there. Tread carefully with Bishu. Next, we're going to the Los Angeles Valiant. They're playing the Florida Mayhem and the Boston Uprising. Look, this is the best where Philly has the best possible matchup. the Valiant have the second best possible matchup right now. They've got, with Florida and Boston, they only have 6 maps. Wednesday, Friday, they've got good space between them. Look, I think Valiant's actually going to capitalize and win both of these, and putting both 2 wins on the map right there for them really is big for playoff implications, but also for fantasy value. I think however, they have shown now that they're going to play some garbage minutes. So if they're up 3-0, I could see them putting in some garbage time there. So be careful a little bit. Next, you got the San Francisco Shock. They're putting on against the London Spitfire and the Houston Outlaws. 5 maps, Thursday, Friday. Look, Shock, it's going to be kind of difficult for them. The Houston matchup's going to be tough. I don't think they've got it in them to beat them. But look, London has been looking shaky. I think they may be able to pull it off. It should be a close game at least. So I look to fire up your San Francisco Shock players. Architect has become a must start, and looks like Sinatra is taking over that full second DPS role. Dante looked very just out of his depth there, so Sinatra may be a good pickup, must start for you with the Shock. Moving on to the Seoul Dynasty, look, they're playing New York and London. I don't see them with their in utter turmoil. They got 5 maps, which may help a little bit, but it's just not going to help enough. Look, Seoul Dynasty players are just don't play them this week. I don't think there's anybody that I would play from the Seoul Dynasty, not even Fleta. I'm not sure I would play Fleta, and that's a real risk. But I mean, look, they're playing New York. They're going to get stomped. They may be able to make some points off of London, but even now, I don't think they're, after seeing London, seeing Seoul, I don't expect it. And your typical Shanghai Dragons getting crushed here. They're playing Philly and New York, 5 maps, Thursday, Saturday. They're going to get stomped. Don't play them. Ado is now in a whatever, playing. He's in a cycle with Damon and Dia. So Ado, who was one of a playable Shanghai Dragons, is no longer a playable Shanghai Dragon. And they're playing 2 of the best teams this patch. I just don't expect anything. Don't play him at all.
And if you're keeping track of Fearless, he was number 12 on the week. He was behind Mickey. He was behind Bijou. He was behind Awesome Guy, Mono, Meko, OGE, Super. A lot of players that he was previously outscoring. It's very nerve-wracking for me. Also, why'd you have to bring up the 8-0 thing? I'm so mad at Shanghai. I've been saying so many times they were going to get a win in this season. That of course they will. It's such a long season. And I don't care that that Dallas didn't lose to them or anything like that, but that was their chance, and they just didn't have a plan, and they just didn't do it. Oh, I'm so mad at Shanghai. Look, any pity rooting I did for them, any pity rooting I used to do for them is now officially over, unless it directly improves the Outlaws' chance to make the playoffs. Lose, please, by all means.
Can we just get behind? Stop rooting for bad teams. Look, I'm sorry, but bad teams. No.
You're a Dallas fan, buddy.
If you're not geolocated, if you're not from China, why are you rooting for Shanghai?
No, let people root for whatever they want.
I'm just saying. I
will say,
stop cheering for awful teams.
A lot of that is Gaguri fans,
and then recycle.
A lot of that is Gaguri fans, but if you're not actually a Shanghai fan and you're just loudly rooting for them because they haven't won yet, I don't know. I kind of get it.
I'm still fine with it.
I've had a little fun with it.
Overwatch is good.
I've had a little fun with it, and it's really interesting and weird to kind of see the dynamic where the crowd's going nuts for the team that hasn't won yet. It is weird, but I don't know. I'm a little torn on that one, but I don't hate where you're coming from on that, Asmith. So.
I get it. I just don't want I just hate that we're giving all this popularity to horrible teams right now. Just let them go off into sadness and 0-40, and then hey, they suck so bad they have to change everybody.
14-hour scrim blocks aside.
Yeah.
Blevins, I cut you off. Anything to throw in here before we move on?
I was just gonna say I don't mind you don't have to root for the team you're geolocated for. My new favorite hockey team is the Las Vegas Golden Knights. So.
Who's your new favorite baseball team?
It is very clearly the Rochester Plates right here.
Mine too. I didn't know I liked any baseball teams, but I found out this weekend that I certainly do.
Shout outs to Trevor May for getting me to look into the Rochester Red Wings for long enough to realize that they're doing a promotion where they are sometimes the Rochester Garbage Plates.
Yeah. Maybe a name the Shanghai Dragons can take a look at. But anyways, just cut the word plates off because we love garbage plates, so we don't want that associated with them associated with one of our favorite meals. Moving on, though, let's talk about the sleepers that we have for the upcoming week here. It's been a minute, so we're going to reset the game a little bit here and spread things out. We're going to throw a little shade at Blevins and never let him pick second, I don't think.
For what it's worth. I threw shade at myself at the beginning.
Yes. So. He's shamed himself more in the pre-show than I have on the show, and that's saying something. So moving on here, I'm going to take the first DPS sleeper of the week. Again, our rules here for sleepers is that they're currently outside the top 15 in scoring for their position. A couple of these players on these lists are actually very good options, and you'll know that, but they do fall outside the top 15 on the season. So I'm going to be going with EQO of the Philadelphia Fusion. Have I mentioned they've got some sweet matchups against Shanghai and Dallas this week. I really, really expect them to pop off. EQO has just really continued to impress and played really, really well throughout the season. Despite the inconsistencies returning on the team, I think from a fantasy standpoint, we can forgive that, and I'm all in on starting EQO this week. Asmith, who do you got for your DPS sleeper?
Look, I'm going to take another guy who has an easy matchups this week, and that's Agilities.
Oh, you want to keep Agilities? You don't want to cut Agility? What are they? Oh, do you not remember that episode anymore? Did that happen?
I do remember that episode.
I do not recall what you're talking about.
For anybody not remembering, they laughed me out of my own Discord call on my own podcast that I host for suggesting that you not drop the man. So, A. Smith, talk to us about why you should start the guy you dropped 3 weeks ago.
Look, all right, it was more than that. It was longer than that. Fair enough. Look, things change, man. Things change. Ebb and flow. Look, Agilities has locked up this Junkrat role for them, and Junkrat's pretty good in this meta. So he's been doing pretty good here. So they've got pretty easy picks against Florida and Boston this week. And I like them to win them both, and I think it's going to be close enough maybe that they don't pull garbage minutes. So we'll see. But it is, I think Agility is going to pop off. He was number 10 right now this week. So number 10 this week, I think he's got number 7 in him this upcoming week.
Yeah, and Boston is a hard dive team, and he's kind of their chosen Brigitte. Like, if they get to pick out of any of the 6 who they want to play Brigitte, I do believe it's Agilities. So if you just figure Boston's just going to keep diving into them over and over again, should be a pretty good week for any Brigitte players that go against Boston and any of the other teams stuck on dive like Shanghai or Seoul or anything like that. Blevins, who do you got for a DPS sleeper?
Yeah, well, since, Death picked EQO, who should probably be in the top 15 overall if he would have played at the beginning of the season, I'm going to go ahead and soft cheat as well and pick Architect here. Look, Architect has been as good as advertised when Monty was talking about him during the trade acquisition period as a player that should be picked up. San Francisco Shock have definitely liked him being on the team. He's had... the last 2 weeks, he's had almost 200 points, and then the previous few weeks, he's had a couple of sub 100 points and then a $140 week. But all things are trending upward for him. They've got a matchup against they're playing London and Houston, which are potentially both kind of a rough matchup. London might not be, though, and it could be deceptively close against Houston. And if it is, it's going to be in large part due to Architect. So definitely not an easy week for him, but that also might mean more maps for the Shock. So definitely has the chance to spike you quite a few points.
Yeah, well, the only counterpoint I have to what you said is you said he's as good as advertised. I think he's better than he was advertised leading in, because we had no idea he could Widowmaker like that. That was an absolute surprise. A. Smith, you're going to lead us off for the tank sleepers. Who you got this week?
Look, I am going to take the goal. Seagull himself. Look, this guy has been incredible. He's
but A. Smith, he plays DPS. He's not a tank player.
Hey, guess what? Winston Lab's not going to change it because one thing we count on is Lab not doing it. Hey, yo. All right.
Boo you people for cheating at this game. You should
All
be
right.
ashamed of yourselves.
All right, well, A. Smith set the rules, so I'm going to take Timo. Blevins, who do you got?
Well, Death, I don't care about you cheaty McCheatersons. I'm still going to win even with you cheating, because cue up that clip, Death, because I want that blood-soaked hammer of super. I'm going all in on the
Oh
shot
my
here.
goodness, it is carnage. The hammer soaked in the blood of his
Super-
enemies.
I mean, we've been waiting for him for quite some time. He's really starting to get into his rhythm as well. That hammer is not going to soak itself in blood. Who better than Super to do so?
Pro tip, when you tell me to play a clip, stop talking for 5 seconds
Nope.
so I can play the clip. But nonetheless, yeah, it's more his meta. He was on the leader section for a reason, so solid pick there. Too bad we cheated and you're gonna lose. Moving on.
We'll see. I want double. I want 2 episodes of King if Super beats both of you guys.
Lord bet me Super over Taimu on tank points this week right now. Lord bet
No,
me.
I don't want Lord bet.
Coward.
Okay.
I want a
King
free
bet, do
Lord
it.
bet. I want a free King bet. I want a free King bet.
No, I don't give you things
Today
for free.
I
What is this,
learned-
communism.
Today I learned that Blevins wouldn't play Rascal if he had him on his roster because he's a coward. But
Also, Rascal's not even in the league, so can't play him. So
well, it means you could pick him up. All you
you
got to do is
actually
scrape
still
up
can
enough
play
money to
him.
buy a team.
He's
Yeah,
still in Winston's lab. You can still play him.
play him against me this week, Blevins. You
Do
won't.
it.
You're a coward.
I probably am.
Play Rascal, you coward. Blevins, start us off
God,
with your
it's gonna
support
be-
sleeper.
You have no. I'm literally going to play Rascal against you this week, and I'm going to win, and you will literally never hear the end of it.
Hey, don't do it. I need you to win.
Please, by all means, give it a
I
shot,
will-
bud.
if
Give it
I-
a shot,
here's the-
friendo.
Okay, so hold on. If I play Rascal and win, I literally have immunity from everything forever. That's just going to be
Until the end of the season, sure.
I can literally never be called a coward again. That's what I have immunity from.
I
Anytime
will-
you would ever think about it, it's just immediately countered because I played Rascal.
I will grant you that for the
picking it up.
duration of the Expert League regular season.
That's
That's all you get. But your support sleeper, Blevins, take it away.
my support sleeper here is Bonnie or
Jerk.
Banny. I still don't know who picks him. I knew that you were going to want to pick up a Houston Outlaws player because A, they're your favorite team, but B, they're on fire right now. And like we were talking about in the pre-show, Banny's really seemed to find his stride here with this new meta. The death ball meta has really kept him. I think your words were, there's nothing that he can go out in the middle of nowhere and just dive to try to save and then get gimped from.
Yeah, no,
So if everyone-
way less diva bombs just randomly sitting around for him to Guardian Angel to and get blown up.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, even if you just look at the points here, Bonnie has had a lot of really good weeks. At least recently, he had a great week this week. And I mean, he's going to be a solid pickup. I mean, he was one of the top Mercy players back in Mercy meta, fell off kind of the last stage or so, and now it looks like he might be back.
Yeah, and for my pick here, I'm going to be going with Harry Hook. I'm more confident that he plays in the next week than I am his counterpart, Sheepshajen, who, if he does play, is probably a better pick. I hate you for it, A. Smith. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the Dallas Fuel schedule, we talked about how they kind of have that puncher's chance against Boston, and then you just kind of have to weather the storm and survive against Philadelphia to have a pretty decent week. It feels a little similar to last week, right? They had a really tough matchup this week in one of them, and then Shanghai in the other one, if memory serves. I'm blanking on who they played this week.
Yeah, Gladiators.
Gladiators, yeah. So, A. Smith laid this out earlier. It mirrors what they did last week. He performed very well last week. Both of the supports did for Dallas. So I'm willing to take a flyer on him as a sleeper. A. Smith, even though I already announced it for you, go ahead.
Look, I'm not a coward, and I actually pick people who have a chance of winning here. So I'm going to go with Sheepshajen because... No, I'm just kidding. Look, Sheepshajen may or may not play. Who knows? He played last week and he did pretty well. He actually was getting several picks. It was kind of fun seeing Sheepshajen back in the kill feed again. It kind of reminded me back of like Envious days, like, oh, Sheepshajen's popping off. So who knows if he plays, he's going to do pretty well because I like the matchup. Same thing DeathBlow said about copy pasta.
Yeah. They were very, very similar in points scored last week, so that one should
Yeah.
be a close race there.
Nah, it'll be close.
Let's move on here. Me and Asmith each have a Douse the Flames this week. I've been spoiling everything this episode. I've already kind of let mine slip. But Asmith, who are you going to Douse the Flames on this week?
I'm gonna douse the flames on the baguettes everywhere. French players everywhere are getting doused the flames on. Look, AKM, douse the flames on him. He's not playing. They like Taimu and Sequel better than AKM. All right, Unko didn't even play last week. Sheepshajen played over Unko. Poco gone. Hot Butt in. Hot Butt, the new hot thing. Those are the only three French players in the league, right? I don't think there are anymore.
Sounds right.
So, baguettes everywhere have been nerfed. I'm just kidding. They haven't been nerfed, but douse the flames on them.
When you say baguette, you have to specify
Baguettes.
that you don't mean Brigitte, which is
No,
very
no,
commonly referred to as baguette as well.
Yeah, no, French players. The Frenchies.
Oh, yeah, soon. Yeah. Good.
People that surrender.
Shout out
soon.
Minnesota.
Yes, actually, Soon didn't do that well either, so there you go.
He had a rough week for sure. My Douse of Flames is going to be on Libero. Like Blevins said earlier, there's a good chance you see a lot of Pine next week, and he's the one that subs out, right? Like if they found a home for SBB and he could score 375 fantasy points in a tracerless meta, then there's no stopping that man, and it's going to have to be Libero that comes out when they want to play Pine. We haven't seen the full map pool for this team, so we don't know how often Libero is going to be playing. We might have to watch the maps very, very carefully with how we use him and how they use Libero and Pine together. So I'm just not sold that he's like a top 5 DPS option. I think he's more like a top 15 DPS option. So, slow your roll a little bit on Libero just because he had a good point total last week. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to repeat. I would go a little slow on that one in particular. But moving into the last segment of the show here, we've got the mailbag. We've got a bunch of questions from Dr. Witz, and then we've got a meme question from the Bellman, of course, who's not allowed to skip those ever again. So from Dr. Witz, we have, is Pine worth the pickup from the unsigned players? Blevins, they're your team. Why don't you take this one?
Yeah, from unsigned players. Well, okay, it depends. So if you need the problem is that even if he see like a week like this against like Shanghai, where he'll probably see more minutes than he normally does, he's still probably not getting a ton of points. I'm trying to see, has he ever even gotten like 200 points? I'm trying to see if that has ever even happened. But just my gut says no. He's gotten 215 1 week.
That was week 4 a long time
That was
ago.
a million years ago.
Maybe OB didn't play at all.
That was a million years ago. He's barely cracked 100 since then. You would have to really, really be pining for points to pick him up. He's more of a trophy where you just have him on your team and you feel good that you have him on your team, but you never play him.
I don't know about you, but I have him locked and loaded in my old scoring format because there are literally no other DPS. So.
Old scoring format. You do really crazy things so that you don't get negative points, and playing Pine is definitely one of them.
All right, so a similar question here I'm going to throw to you, A. Smith. We're going a little out of order, but is Snillo worth the pickup over Logix or Effect?
Ooh, Snillo over Logix and Effect. No on Effect. I mean, sure on Effect, but I don't think Snillo's much in a playing position either. To be honest with you, I think Logix is the pick there. Effect is gone and out of country, so there's no signs of him coming back. So at this point, I'd probably drop him because I don't think he's coming back. So you can pick up Snillo, but I don't think Snillo is going to get many more points than Effect, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I'm going to answer that question by answering your other question here, Dr. Witz, and that's how much do you think Logix will play? How often would you bench a Saya player? Because for me, the answer is never. So that's about how often I think Logix is going to play the rest of the way going forward.
Hey, he played for Manitou.
Did they have them both out there?
For Manitou on the 4th map.
Did he? Okay. So
Yeah,
there might be some spot usage for him. Oh, that's right. We did see him on the Zarya a little bit here. Makes sense. The Tracer players do just have such a similar, the tracking aim style is so similar on Zarya to what Tracer does that it does make a little bit of sense. But I don't think it's going to be near enough that he's going to be a reliable fantasy asset for you. As far as your other question goes, though, it's got to be better than Snillo because I don't think Snillo's going to play. Look for Silk Thread. That would be my solution to somebody that might very well be sitting out there. One last question. an old scoring format, Sato or Poco. I'll give my answer. You guys can chime in if you disagree. Poco's probably done, and he hasn't been the Poco you want since stage 1. So I would rather own Sato, and I would rather start somebody else, at least for the next week or two here. Any disagreements or anything to chime in on that answer?
Yeah, all I'll say is that the self-fulfilling prophecy of the nerf Poco shirt came true.
I mean, I doused the flames on French players, so you should see where I stand on that.
Can't do it. Now we move into the meme question here from the Bellman. Who should Asmith bring on from the league to help with his sheep game? Anybody who doesn't know, there's like an Asmith Productions out there creating video games for your phone, all about sheep. Nobody knows why. Asmith won't tell us why, but it's clearly him. So, Asmith, who are you picking up to help you with your game?
Oh, this is a tough one. I've thought about this, and I've gone back and forth for a while. Look, the obvious choice might be Jake because he's got such a big brain, and he might be able to help me out in new things.
Could run your PR for you.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Nope. Incorrect.
Okay, who is it, Blevins? Tell me.
Okay, obviously, like, it can't be Jake because Jake has a job right now. So you need to pick someone who doesn't. So IDQD, easiest pick of all time. I mean, even Numlock is getting maps now, so we need someone who's definitely not going to. So you get the two-piece combo. You get IDDQD and you get Mendo. Boom.
Oh, there we go. That's it. Easy clap.
Also, aren't there a lot of sheep in Sweden? IDDQD might know a lot about sheep. That could be a thing.
I have no idea.
That's not.
I've never been to Sweden.
And
in my head, they're all about sheep in Sweden. So,
and in keeping with the meme, let me just point this out. So, I legitimately was going to sign Rascal and play him this week. He's literally still on Moirai's team.
You have to trade her.
I gotta trade. I need to offer her a trade. I need to try to get a trade. I'm gonna try.
If you don't, you're a coward. That's all I have to say.
I'm gonna try to trade Nuss for Rascal right now. Let's ask to trade.
My answer here, A. Smith, for who you should pick up for your sheep game.
Okay.
It's right off of your team, okay? You've got to pick up Sheepshajen and bring him onto your team. 100% must pick for your sheep game. But you never gave your answer, so who are you picking up?
Oh, okay. So, here's my thought. Marketing, Fraggy, big beard, larger man, kind of you put him some white, put a big white shirt, cotton balls on him. He looks like a sheep. Just saying.
If you shear his beard, you're dead to me, and you're off the show.
I would shear it. This is not a sheep shearing game. This is a sheep counting game. It makes me go to sleep. Apparently.
You want to know who the real person to pick up to play sheep are? All the people rooting for Shanghai Dragons because you literally are all sheep.
Actually,
blindly.
I just thought of somebody. Meep the Sheep. Meep the Sheep is a coach. I believe he does analyst work for Boston, if I'm not mistaken. Meep the Sheep. Sheep's the name.
When we're going for puns here, I mean Sheepshajen is top tier.
Yeah, I was going to say tweet at us or tell us on Discord who you think had the best answer to the meme question, but we all know I nailed it. We all know I nailed it. So you can just tell me I'm great in Discord or something like that.
That's not close. Sheepshajen, clear winner.
I always appreciate.
I feel like that, even though it has nothing to do with anything, it's got to be an episode title, right? Sheepshajen, clear winner.
Easy.
All right, well, that is going to wrap up the show for today. Everybody, Blevins, where can people find you on Twitter and on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at @_Blevins, and if you like watching Hearthstone, you can follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/TheBlevins.
A. Smith, where can we find you on the internet?
Find me on Twitter at ASmith_OW, and I will tweet some more, but
all right. Some of those words got cut off, but nonetheless, I think they got the gist of it. As for myself, you can find me on Twitter at HNP DeathBlow. Also, you can find the show at HNP_FOWL play. I finally got who has the underscore and who doesn't correct, and I'm very, very proud of myself. And I only know I got it correct because Blevins was nodding while I was doing it and is used to me screwing it up. So that wraps up this episode. If you are a live viewer, hang tight. We're going to be dropping the stream for a minute and then coming right back up to go with the flagship show. It is a double feature day today. And as always, if you want to watch us record live, you can do so on twitch.tv/High Noon Podcast. Join our Discord, discord.me/High Noon Podcast. It's popping in there. There's a lot of live tournament chat going on game days, everything like that. So stop in, hang out with us, have a good time.
We've got literal Blizzard employees, Overwatch League casters, pro players. The lot of them are all in there. A lot of them looking to.
Don't join and start adding them, though, by the way.
They don't add people, but if they're in the conversation, which a lot of times they are.
They are, yeah.
Definitely feel free to contribute.
Yeah, and you can always at any one of the hosts on any one of our shows. We all love interacting with the fans, so by all means, stop by, hang out with us. And we will see you guys all next week as we tell you who is in the playoffs and who is not for the expert leagues. Have a good one, guys. We'll see you next week.
See you.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. He threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and